What are some great ways to teach your kids well-loved stories? Well, listen to our interview now with performance storyteller and author Bob Hartman, who is the author of the YouVersion Bible App for Kids Bible Stories, which has been downloaded over 70 million times, as well as the Lion Storyteller Bible, which has been printed in 11 different languages. Bob is going to talk to us today about his newest series, the Clever Cub series, which tells amazing stories in fun ways with beautiful and cute illustrations. Bob is married to Sue, has 2 married children, Carrie and Chris, and 5 grandchildren. Stay tuned towards the end of the show to find out how to get your very own copy of the Clever Cub stories. So sit back and enjoy the show with Bob Hartman. Hello, this is Mary Jo Tinlin from Teaching Your Toddler, and today we have author and performance storyteller Bob Hartman joining us. Thank you so much for coming on the show today, Bob. Tell us a little bit about yourself and about your background, and then also how you became an author and also a performance storyteller.
Sure. I live in the UK and have lived here for many years, but I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania originally, so massive Steelers fan. And I originally trained and was called to be a pastor. So my first church was actually over here in the UK. And while I was pastoring the church, I started to retell Bible stories for the congregation. They were an older congregation. They kind of knew their Bible stories. So sometimes you'd see that look in their eyes like, oh, been there, done that, when you start into a story. So I decided to retell the stories from a different angle, to kind of get them into the whole thing without them knowing, you see what I mean? So to surprise them. And when I was about to finish the ministry here, one of the parishioners said to me, oh, you want to try and write those things down and get them published. So I moved back to the States, actually, after that, back to Pittsburgh for a while. And my brother had been involved in children's theater, and he was interested in storytelling, and so was I. And so at about the same time, we formed a storytelling troupe and represented the Pittsburgh Children's Museum. And I also started to write some of those Bible retellings down and attempted to get them published. And eventually that happened. And so I ended up kind of doing 2 things, telling the stories out loud to people, to kids, to adults, to anybody who would like to listen, and also telling them in a written form and having them published as well. So that's kind of where I come from, and that's how those things all kind of came together.
Oh my goodness, what an interesting way to that. That's really cool. So when you were retelling those Bible stories, how did you sort of like come up with what you were going to say? Did it come to you, or did you script it? Like, how did that work?
I did script it originally. As a matter of fact, I still script most of the stuff I do, because it helps you to kind of be that bit more exact with the material. And yeah, initially the whole idea was to try and, as I say, come into the stories from a different angle. So maybe I would create a character who maybe saw the biblical event take place and try and tell the story from that person's point of view. Or maybe I would pick a character that you don't usually get some sense of in the story itself. So like I would retell the story of David and Goliath from the point of view of Goliath, that kind of a thing. And I just started playing with the stories. And the more I played with them and spent time with them, the more ways I found to actually get into them.
Oh my goodness, that's very interesting, and I'm sure it made it definitely a better or different perspective for your congregation.
It did indeed, and in most cases, I think they enjoyed it. And even when the material moved to being written more for children, I mean, they enjoyed it just as much. And when I got to actually telling those stories out loud, I also incorporated a lot of interactive devices so they could, in effect, join with me in kind of bringing the story to life.
Oh my goodness, that's really cool. So how does that work when they sort of join with you?
Well, it just depends. Again, I like to think that the interactive devices arise from the story itself. So, for example, I wrote something called the Lion Storyteller Bible, and it's full of stories that are written specifically to be told out loud. So in the case of the Stilling of the Storm, for example, I simply have the children pretend to be not the disciples, but actually the waves on the Sea of Galilee. And so they're kind of wiggling their fingers and rocking back and forth ever so gently. at the beginning. And it's kind of like, wow, it was a perfect day. The sky was blue and the sea too, and the little waves splashed happily at the side of the shore. And then I kind of take the story from there. So Jesus talks to the crowd, climbs into the boat, he falls asleep. And then I get really, really quiet. And then I say, and then suddenly the day was not so perfect. And boom, the boat rocked this way and the boat rocked that way. And the waves went here and the waves went there. And so they kind of represent the waves. And then, of course, by the end of the story, when Jesus tells them to sort of settle down, they do. And they're kind of back to the original place again. So it's trying to find interactive devices that actually help to tell the story, not just things to do for their own sake.
Right. Oh my gosh, that's so interesting because that immersiveness, like it really puts it into literally into their body, but also then it puts it into their brain, right? Because they've been a part of what you were telling them.
It does indeed. They talk about, we learn so much more when we don't just listen to something, but we are actually, involved in it, and our bodies are involved in it. Of course, there's loads of children who are active learners who really aren't all that interested in just hearing something. They want to be involved as well. So the interactive devices work both for those kinds of learners, but then also for the kids who will get something from just listening to it because, well, they'll get that as well. So it's a way of really trying to bring the Bible stories to life for as many children as possible.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, you're right. I mean, they're kinetic learners, right? My oldest son is like that. He needed to kind of move around and get it into his body. And oh my gosh, that's really a cool way to teach that. Because a lot of times, people think, oh, it's just dry, old, boring stuff. But I mean, the stories are very interesting, especially when you do it that way, right?
Exactly. My Storyteller Bible was picked up about 20 years ago by an organization over here in the UK called Open the Book. And they were trying to tell the Bible stories in creative ways to children in their community, initially in a place called Bedford. And I got involved with them because they were using the Storyteller Bible, trying to bring it to life. And over the course of the last 20 years, the whole thing has grown so that we ended up training something like 17,000 storytellers nationwide. And right before COVID hit, we were in about 3,500 schools telling those stories to about 800,000 kids every week. Wow. So the idea was to kind of spread those stories, but to spread them in a way that the children would enjoy and look forward to and really engage with week by week.
Oh, I bet they did. So now I saw that there were events that you do. Is that kind of what you're talking about, or is there something else that you're doing? And is that different now that because of COVID?
Yeah, COVID did change a lot, but prior to COVID, I would go along and support the Open the Book storytellers and be involved in training with them and in events that just kind of help to encourage them to kind of carry on. But yeah, I mean, I just would visit schools on my own and do assemblies at the beginning of the day and then, tell Bible stories throughout the day. I would do church conferences and churches and community events. I mean, really just any place anybody was looking for a storyteller. Because, of course, over here, because there is a state church, you're allowed to tell Bible stories in schools. And as a matter of fact, in many cases, you're encouraged to. And it's a question of kind of fulfilling a legal obligation on the school's part. So it's kind of a different situation than it would be in the States.
Oh my goodness. I that thought occurred to me as you were saying that. So I'm glad you mentioned that because I was interested in that. And so you also, before we start to talk about Clever Cub, you also authored the YouVersion Bible App.
I did. Yes.
Tell us how that happened.
Well, I was working with an organization called One Hope, and they had a Bible game sort of app called Bible Islands, and they asked me to retell the Bible stories on that particular app. So I wrote probably 70 Bible retellings for them that were, I don't know, probably 500-600 words long. So, pretty full, pretty detailed retellings. And then when that was all done, they approached me and they said, well, listen, somebody has approached us and they would like us to create some Bible retellings for them. Could you take the ones you've already done and reduce them to about, 150 to 200 words?
Oh my goodness, that's like a tweet. Oh no, not a word. Okay, character. Sorry.
Yeah.
But still,
yeah.
150 words, that's pretty small.
Like 30 words per panel. And I didn't really know who this was for, actually. But they said, yeah, would you do that? I was like, well, yeah, fine, no problem. And as a matter of fact, it was a lot of fun trying to maintain the sense of the story, and reducing the word count. So I did that with them. And then they said, oh, well, this is for YouVersion. And these stories will form the basis of the Bible app that they're creating. And of course, they've done a brilliant job with Bible app. I mean, it's a beautiful app, really, really well done. Very interactive, which is what I love about it. And I'm just pleased to have been involved with it.
Oh, that's amazing. Just for the audience, it has been downloaded over 70 million times. That's great. Wow. That's reaching a lot of people.
It is. As I say, very grateful to be involved with that. And, all the families that have had the opportunity to, to hear God's word and to hear his story through the app. Yeah, it's been brilliant.
Oh. Wow. So tell us a little bit about Clever Cub, how that sort of came about, and about the books themselves.
Clever Cub originally started out as Sleepy Bear. I kind of proposed this idea for a set of stories to the folks at David C. Cook. And I think we decided quite early on that if he was just Sleepy Bear, then the adventures and the stories he would be able to engage with would be rather limited to sort of sleepy time, gentle kinds of stories. And so the editor suggested to me that maybe something like Clever Cub would give us the opportunity to put him in all different kinds of contexts. So that's
instead of bedtime only.
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So we could use them anywhere and everywhere. And so I retold, initially it was the story of the creation. It was the Christmas story. It was Peter and John at the Beautiful Gate, and then Psalm 104 as the first 4 books. But there are, 4 more books coming next year and then 4 coming after that. So Clever Cub finds himself in all different kinds of situations. And usually the stories arise because he has a question or a concern that his mother or his father want to help him to deal with. And they use the Bible story as a way of helping him to, to get the question answered, to maybe find a bit of courage or a bit of confidence or a bit of peace in this situation. And so it's about their relationship. And I'd like to think maybe a way of modeling for parents, a way of kind of telling God's story to their children and interacting with them and with God's story. But it's also about him and his little friends and, him kind of being immersed in the stories as well, because sometimes he sort of gets sucked into the story and he's there, along with the characters in the story itself.
Oh, and the illustrations, by the way, are so adorable. We'll make sure and have some links to the to the books as well, but also to the covers, because it's such a cute story. And then but then also teaching about different verses, as you had mentioned. So you've got the 4 that you mentioned before, but now you've got 4 more that comes out in 2022.
Yes. So that's going to be Miriam. It's going to be the Easter story. It's going to be the feeding of the 5,000, and it's going to be the spies in Canaan. So, yeah. Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Those are good ones. Wow. That's fantastic. So, David C. Cook, did they help connect you to the illustrator, or did you have someone you had been working with?
No, they suggested a choice of illustrators to me, and that's what happens now. When I first started writing, generally speaking, publishing companies would just say, well, look, this is who's going to do the picks. But the longer that you do it, the more they sort of trust you to help them choose the illustrator in the process. And so Steve was one of the people that was suggested to me. And I just felt like his style sort of suited the text better than some of the other choices that we had. And it certainly proved to be the case. I think he's really brought Clever Cub to life in a way that I saw him when I was imagining the stories themselves.
Yes, Steve Brown is the illustrator, and he does such a good job, and just it's very colorful and easy for kids, all kids, I guess, to enjoy the pictures. So that's fantastic. Are there other books that you've written?
Yes, I've written almost 100 books. Yeah, I've been doing this for like 30 years. So I suppose when you divide it by 30, it doesn't sound like it's that many per year, but
more than most people, though.
Some of them are longer than others. So I mean, I wrote that Storyteller Bible, which has been around since '95, and as I say, used by our Open the Book teams over here. I did something called the Play Along Bible for Tyndall a few years ago, and it's designed for very small children. The stories are very short, but the idea is you do a line and there's an action at the end of each line that the parent and the child can do together. And then do it again and again and again, because you know how it is with little guys. I mean, once they latch onto something, they love to repeat it, whether it's a song, story, or a rhyme. So there's that one. I'm just looking at my desk here. Let's see. There's a rhyming Bible here in front of me. There's something called Hanging Out with Jesus Again, which is written for older children. That's the story of Jesus, but through the eyes of three of his disciples, Pip, Tomo, and Big Bart, who are Philip, Thomas, and Bartholomew. So yes, I mean, there's loads of them.
Oh my goodness, that is amazing. So can people find that on a website?
Yes. Well, they can find the Clever Cub books on the David C. Cook website, but if they were to go on, just an online book site like Amazon or, sort of the Christian alternatives to that, they just put Bob Hartman in there. They would find a whole bunch of books, that have been throughout the career. Some of them are out of print now, but there are a lot that, are still in print. So if they're interested, they can look there, and they're for all ages, as well as books actually written for adults and books about how to tell stories, Bible stories in particular, for adults too. The only thing I would suggest is that the lead guitarist for the Christian band Petra is also called Bob Hartman. So if anything pops up about a guitar or music, that's not me.
That's a good distinction.
Yes.
Isn't that funny? Also a Christian connection there, but wow. Well, this is great. I'm so excited about these books and that you've got more coming out. And we will, of course, have a link in the show notes for the books, and so that the listeners can find them. I also hope that people will comment on our Facebook page or other social media, for a chance to get one of these books. I have 4 of them, so I would love to give them away to people if they make comments on this episode. And this is great. So, what else do we need to know? What else would you like us to know about you, or about the books, or about anything?
I don't know. I'd just like to encourage parents to tell God's story to their children. I mean, Psalm 78 says, somebody passed God's story onto you, and all God really wants you to do is to pass his story on to the next generation. And I think that's a responsibility he places into all of our hands, parents, grandparents, aunts, and uncles. And while I realize that, a lot of people are involved in their churches, and there is an opportunity to, have Sunday school teachers and youth club leaders pass God's story on to your kids, there's actually no better person than you to do it, because their time with your children is limited, whereas you have the opportunity to do it. We have the opportunity to do it on a regular basis. And I think helping parents and grandparents to find the confidence to do that, and creating resources that reach a variety of children in a variety of ages, is something that I'm really keen to be involved with, and have aimed to be involved with during the course of my writing career, because that's really what my passion is. I want people to feel confident to tell God's story, and to tell it in a way that engages their children and helps them to love the story and to come to love God as a result.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. One last question before I let you go. Do you get to watch the Steelers while you're over there? How do you watch them?
I do.
Is it like the middle of the night?
Indeed. I subscribe to NFL Game Pass.
There you go.
So yes, I get to watch actually as many NFL games as I can. I think the only thing that happens is that Sky over here, the network here, sometimes grabs the games, and I can't watch it when they get it, but you can watch it the next day. So yes, I'm having a good time watching the Steelers. Not this past week; they didn't have such a great game this past week, but it's still great being able to root for the team. Yes.
Oh, absolutely. Very good. Good. I'm glad you get your Steelers fix even across the pond there. Thank you.
Well, I've got my terrible towel. I twirl it. I do the whole thing. And my grandkids, they just live. My daughter and son-in-law and grandkids just live around the corner. So they're Steeler fans as well.
Oh my goodness. How fortunate that you have them close by.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Oh, thank you. Well, Bob, thank you so much for joining Teaching Your Toddler today. It's been such a pleasure, and I can't wait for more people to hear about your books and about you and about, like you said, about God's Word and being able to teach that to our little ones. So, again, thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. Thank you. This has been the Teaching Your Toddler podcast with Mary Jo Tinlin. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you'll find us on our website at teachingyourtoddler.com, as well as on Facebook at Teaching Your Toddler, on Instagram, and on Twitter at Teaching Toddler. So join us again, and I hope you have a wonderful week. Thank you so much.